Hey there, welcome to Woohoo Wednesday. This week, I want to talk to you about taking on a new perspective. I was asked to take on a new perspective. One of our clients asked me to sit as his proxy at a healthcare roundtable that he couldn't make on blockchain. Now, I heard a lot about blockchain at South by Southwest when I spoke there, but I certainly am not an expert on blockchain. And I certainly am not an expert on blockchain as it relates to healthcare. And as I was talking to my client about what he thought about the roundtable and his thoughts that he wanted me to represent, he said, Trace, do I hear a little bit of uncertainty in your voice? And I said, yeah, I'm not a blockchain expert. So I'm just gonna go and absorb. And that's what I did. And I sat at this roundtable with all of these really interesting, smart people. There were people from pharmaceutical companies and doctors and hospitals, and the state was there, and people from health insurance, regulators, researchers. So it was really fascinating to hear all of the things that they were talking about as it related to this idea of blockchain, of keeping an ongoing ledger of data through the life of a patient. But guess what? I was taking this all in. I was taking my copious notes. I wasn't going to speak. I got put on the spot by the moderator. And he said, Tracy, what do you think? Is this innovation? I said, well, innovation to me is ideas plus action. And I hear a lot of great ideas, and I'd love to see some action from this group. But what I do notice is that I hear all these great perspectives, but the one that's missing is the patient. So I'm gonna sit here and talk about the perspective of the patient. And it was really interesting because they were a little bit uncomfortable and then they were appreciative. And I think this reminds me of what happens in our daily lives at work, that we get stuck in our perspective. And it brings up this parable. You might have known this parable already. It's the 6 blind men. Now, the 6 blind men walk up to an elephant and someone says, what do you think this is? And one blind man bumps into the elephant's side and says, I think it's a wall. And the other one walks around and feels the tusk and the sharpness at the end, and he said, it must be a spear. And the third blind man reaches around to the knee of the elephant's leg and says, well, surely it must be a tree. And the fourth blind man feels the floppiness of the ear and says, it must be a fan. And the fifth blind man feels the trunk moving and starts swinging around and says, oh, I think it's a snake. And finally, the sixth blind man reached around to the back to the stinky tail and felt the texture of it and said, it must be a rope. Now, we all have done this. We've all come at something from only one perspective. And this parable is meant to teach you about the idea of having a fixed perspective solely on your subjective truth. We all have our fixed subjective truth. And we need a lot of different subjective truths to be able to see the full picture. And I was able to, in this roundtable, to be able to represent the subjective truth, my subjective truth, only mine, as a patient, for this group who had all of their own truths. And so my challenge for you this week is to think about, how are you getting out of your fixed mindset? How are you getting out of your role, your category, your perspective to take on a potential other truth? Whether it's sitting in the role of the consumer, sitting in the role of your client, your customer, like if you're in CPG and you're selling to a retailer, it's sitting in the role of a doctor if you're selling some kind of nutritional supplement. Whatever those subjective truths are really valuable. How are you stuck in your fixed subjective truth, and how do you need to get out of it? In any organization, we get stuck in our lane, we get stuck in our area of expertise, and we can really benefit from taking that hat off and saying, okay, what is the other perspective I'm missing? How can I take on a new perspective today? How might I look at my own challenge, my own industry, my own category differently if I were to take on a new subjective truth? So think about that. What are the truths that you're missing? What are the perspectives you could pull in? What are the perspectives that you could take? And how might this take you somewhere new? If you have challenges with this, please, we'd love to hear from you. Send us your questions, send us your comments, and we hope that this takes you to a new place. Have a great week.